by focusing on the result, then I can understand what kind of process I need. But if I focus so much on the process, the result is the process. But that's not actually in business. It's not enough. You know, at the end of the day, a business needs to be profitable, or it needs to save costs, or it needs to have some kind of social impact. But there needs to be a specific result for that organization. So my name is Lewis Albertini. I'm going to be talking a little bit about marketing and marketing research in Kazakhstan. But first, I'll talk a little bit quickly about myself. So I'm from the US, but I've been living in Kazakhstan for about four and a half years. Studied at Michigan Imperial College, and then I did a Princeton program that sent me to work at KEMEP for 1 year. Professionally, I did microfinance in Bangladesh, worked in marketing, Steelcase, worked for the American Chamber of Commerce, and then did sort of some startups and different kind of projects here and in the US. So I was raised in, just quickly, I was raised in Michigan. Does anyone here know about Michigan, or does anyone here flex? Oh yeah, so there's always some flex students actually in my hometown. But I was raised here, but obviously most people know about Detroit. It's where the big automakers are, Ford, GM, Daimler, Chrysler. And one cool fact is that these are called the Great Lakes, and they represent the largest body of fresh water in the world. So our state is kind of just, is surrounded. You can see it from space, so that's kind of cool. Okay, so just some quickly. Grand Rapids is my hometown. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Almaty. Has a kind of similar population, I guess Almaty has about 2 million people, but so my city is about 1.2, 1.3 million. This is winter and then the summer. And it's called Grand Rapids because there's a river that kind of flows through the city. It kind of cuts the city in half. So this is actually when I first came to Kazakhstan, this is the first picture I took in 2015 on my BlackBerry. And I like this picture because it's kind of like surprises me a little bit about how developed Almaty was. I didn't really have a strong expectation, but obviously you can see the skyscrapers and obviously no Dastik Plaza. But when I show this photo to my friends back in the U.S. Or my family, it really impresses them that this city is this developed, this clean, and there's no like horses or like women with like babies. So it's it's like a very modern city, so it's really cool to show them this photo. I like this photo a lot because I first got introduced to like the Kazakh cuisine and like beshbarmak and like barsaki and like shelpek and all this stuff. So it's really, really cool to kind of come back here. On a personal note, I'm actually ethnically Kazakh, but I was raised in the United States. So I don't speak any Kazakh, and English is my native language. So when I decided to come to Kazakhstan, you should kind of see where you're kind of originally from. So the goal was to come to Kazakhstan and to see Almaty here for 1 year, but I ended up staying. I really kind of liked, especially for startups and for entrepreneurship. There's a lot of interesting, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. There's a lot of interesting opportunities here, I think, if you kind of know where to look and how to apply the right techniques. You can really build some cool businesses. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of how you think about structuring those businesses, how you can think about marketing research, and identifying really real problems in the market. So really quick, the first project I did in Kazakhstan was called Orbi. It was 360-degree glasses. Does anyone know this project? So it was, we raised $3.5 million from an Israeli VC fund, and it was the biggest Kazakhstani technology startup that moved out of Kazakhstan to San Francisco. I think we were the only successful case. And so these glasses you basically wear, they have 4 cameras, and then we developed the software to stitch those 4 videos together to create this 360-degree video. So this is a really cool project. The team was engineers, product marketers, operations, finance. Software was in St. Petersburg, production was in China, and then the core team was actually in Almaty. And I was the chief marketing officer, so I was involved a lot with partnerships and thinking about sales and how we can identify new opportunities to grow the company, particularly that company that was based in Almaty and selling primarily to the US and European markets. So really quick, so this is another thing. So after that experience, I decided to think about how I can help other companies here start new businesses or find new opportunities in this market and then the SNG region. So so basically our company does market launch, research and insights, and then growth and pivot. And we focus mostly on the first two. So we help businesses launch new products or new services, and then we do market research and needs finding. So so really quickly, this is kind of an interesting, so we developed this. We had an interesting idea of thinking about what kind of entrepreneurs are in Kazakhstan. We really wanted to think, okay, not think about like San Francisco or Hong Kong or London, but think about specifically in this market, who are these people that are engaged in entrepreneurship? So the first one is Stроители, and these are the kind of the engineers, the Zuckerbergs, the Bezoses, that are just that have a technical understanding and they see the market from that technical view, and they want to build something with that. The second is a big segment in Kazakhstan, the opportunists. So it's entrepreneurs here that that might see a business model in Russia or the US. Okay, so Choco is Groupon, Aviata is Kai. So they look at these opportunities and they see how it can be applied and adapted for the local market. It's probably 80 to 90% of most entrepreneurs in Kazakhstan is that they look in successful case studies. They do the benchmarking, and then they launch a business for this market. This is a fun one, hype machine. So it's like the people who kind of they're on Instagram a lot. They're like talking about their lives, their businesses, but they're not. You don't really know if they have actual sustainable, durable business. They're kind of just on social media a lot. This one is interesting. It's the concept is a silver spoon. So it's a lot of people here too that maybe are from wealthy families, or their parents are governors or like in the government, and they have access to capital, access to resources that a lot of entrepreneurs don't have access to. So they inherited their business. I'm not going to name any names, but they've had a lot of success, and they didn't have to necessarily fundraise and go through a lot of the extra steps that if you don't have those resources, that it takes a long time to build. And then this is another big one in Kazakhstan. It's the sleepers. So it's maybe you're working at the Big Four, or you're working in Mars or P&G or a big company here, and you're always thinking, wouldn't it be cool if I had this idea, or wouldn't it be cool if if we did this business? But 9 out of 10 times, you don't really act on this business. You just kind of, you meet with your friends, you have coffee, but they don't necessarily take that step to entrepreneurship or to building a business. Now that's not a bad thing. Sometimes you do. I came from a corporate background, and I kind of entered entrepreneurship when I was like 25, but it doesn't mean that you're never going to be an entrepreneur. It just means that in the process you have a stable career and you're focused on that. So I think I like this slide because it's kind of a little bit like, so I came from US, and everything is it has a different style of entrepreneurship. Everything is sort of planned and not as reactive. Here in Kazakhstan, it's a little bit different. It works differently. It's kind of a more unstructured, informal market where there's a lot of network talent and networked ideas, and that you need to know this person and need to know that person to really, to get the ball moving really fast. And I think that to understand this system, so when we have partners that come into Kazakhstan and they're used to sort of a more structured, kind of planned, detailed, system, that I think this part is great too, because, for example, if I'm planning and doing and testing, I need to go through all these stages kind of sequentially. But in Kazakhstan, it's cool because I can go from here to here pretty fast. I just send a WhatsApp message, or I call someone, and it moves really fast. So I think there's a benefit actually to working in this kind of system. It's a little bit different, but we actually have some success in it. So getting to the specific challenges in Kazakhstan, and I really try to think about, what are our specific businesses and what are our specific experiences in this market. Not thinking about, in the US, everyone knows the Apple case and Amazon and all these successful entrepreneurs. But I really, that to be here and to be doing that in this market is very different. It takes a different type of skill set and a different perspective as well. So obviously the first challenge is markets are not developed as in the United States. Infrastructurally, there's a lot of bottlenecks. There's a lot of concentration of resources into maybe a few people or a few groups. There's not as much sharing, I think, and it's just beginning. I think there's a lot of potential and ambition, but that's going to take a little bit of time. So for us, market segmentation is very difficult in Kazakhstan because there's not enough publicly available data on consumers, on their spending habits. And even if there is data, you really can't trust it. For example, if you use, we use stat.gov, it's kind of like the benchmark, but there's a lot of discrepancies, a lot of double counting. There's a lot of ways that you need to have a second opinion. But as a market researcher, you're not going to be able to just ask someone, okay, what is the total number of cashless payments in Kazakhstan? Kaspi Bank will give you a statistic, Nur Bank will give you a statistic, the National Bank will give you a statistic. And so what do you do with 4 different numbers? And then my neighbor's telling me this number, and then my Apashka's telling me this thing. So it's you have to think about, okay, what is the right answer here? How big is this actual market? So again, the middle class is not the same as in Europe and the US. We think that Kazakhstan doesn't really have a middle class. And we generate middle class necessarily by ultra premium, super premium, or kind of business kind of style products that are targeted towards those people, or super mass products that are very, very heavily focused on price and utility. So when we take out the bottom, when we take out the top, there's this little bit of the traditionally middle class. And so this is a challenge in terms of a marketing, where do you focus? Do you build a business and you target very, premium, expensive customers? Or do you build a business where it's okay, we're gonna basically compete on price and utility? As far as trying to get into the middle, it's either you either go up or down. It's very hard in Kazakhstan to have a business built right in the middle and grow that way. So again, aspiration versus utility. So this is really important. Does anyone know the concept, aspiration or utility, in terms of marketing? What is aspirational marketing? Okay, good. I have a slide for that. So do you guys know what this is? What does it tell you about the product? Yeah, but I mean, as far as if I just showed you this, if you just saw this on a billboard on a buy, what kind of product would you think this would be? Nike. But if you didn't know Nike, if you didn't know this was a brand, a company, what would you think they were selling?
To action, they're want to make you an action.
Yeah, an aspiration. Yeah, a feeling, kind of oh, just do it. That can be applied to my whole life. Anything can be done, kind of. And this is what it's called, aspirational marketing. It's very, 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 very prevalent in the United States now. We've kind of moved past oh, it's cheap and it's cool and the utility marketing, but it's about the feelings. For example, Uber doesn't call themselves a taxi company anymore. What they say is that we're in the business of human logistics. That doesn't really make sense. But again, that's the aspiration. We don't move, Uber doesn't move people from one building to the other building. What they say in the US is we move your life forward. We move your ability to see things differently. And that's a very, very advanced kind of marketing that really takes a very sophisticated kind of consumer base. So this is utility marketing. This is for Target. It's very simple, right? Price right daily. So every day there's a great price. You can get all these sales. And this makes sense actually. This is this powerful ad. But as far as understanding what Target stands for or what Target is, it's not as important. All you know is Target has great deals and they're daily. So again, this is utility marketing. So basically, because of this kind of split into aspirational or utility marketing, the market is a little bit disorganized. So basically, in terms of distribution and sort of how you get your product to people, in Kazakhstan, it's really difficult. So you have these old school giants. So they're government or quasi-government, and they have a monopoly, or they're family-owned businesses that basically have no competition. So they're these kind of huge animals that really just suck up everyone else. So if you're very small, and then there's unorganized small shops everywhere. So if you're like a very, very small business and you want to launch, for example, like a new payment system, like how are you going to compete with Kaspi and like Alpha and Sverbank if they want to do their own thing? Oftentimes what will happen is they'll find it out and then they'll just copy it and then they'll beat you very quickly. So if you're an entrepreneur, how do you, especially if you're looking at B2B sales, how do you build a business when you have all these old school giants, companies that, that started off maybe even 10 years ago, but have huge resources, have like, big names around them. So the huge emphasis thus is on channel building and relationships. And this is something that in Kazakhstan is very important, but it's also really important in China. It's also very important in India. When you think about not just like having your Instagram ads and your paid media, but you're thinking about you actually going out and building a relationship with your clients, having them understand what your value is, what your products are, and having that utility marketing, but also that aspirational marketing. So again, it's listening to relevant people in these channels. The key word is relevant. So not everyone, you can't sell to everyone. You can't have like, okay, we had one company, they're like 2 students from Nazarbayev University, super smart, and they're like, we want to launch a new coffee shop. Like we found a way to make better coffee from Korea. So they're opportunists, and they're like, we want to launch it in Kazakhstan. We think it's going to be very cool. Coffee, more people are drinking coffee every day. The trends are very strong. And so they invested $100,000 into a coffee shop. They were like, oh yeah, we're going to get Glovo and Choco or Yandex Yeda to like distribute us stuff. But the problem was in 1 month they basically ran out of money because they didn't listen to relevant people in the market. So they thought that every coffee drinker in Kazakhstan will be our target, our market. But the fact is that their coffee is, no one understood how it was made. No one understood like why it's different. And why can't I go to this other place? So again, their market was much smaller than just all coffee drinkers. So again, that goes to market segmentation. So when you're doing market research, the first thing is you look at income, geography, and demographics in Kazakhstan. And those are your 3 axes that allow you to kind of build a rough portrait of who your customer is. But again, income is difficult in Kazakhstan because there's not official statistics. It's like, okay, your household income is 500,000, but people unofficially make a lot more. As you know, they can do other businesses, they can have some other things. So that changes their purchasing power as well. So, officially a government official might make 100,000 tenge, but unofficially he's driving like a Range Rover and has like apartments. So he's spending differently than if you look at these numbers. Geography is also very interesting because again, in Almaty, you have a lot of people who come into Almaty from other regions and have different kind of preferences a little bit. And then you have people who are actually from the city and they sort of have a different kind of spending. So again, you really need to drill down on these and think, okay, it's not just one point. Okay, this guy makes 100,000 tenge, he's from Almaty, and he likes to buy this. Consumers have more sophisticated preferences and tastes than appears on the surface. So again, there's what's this thing called latent demand. It's things that people don't say they want. So like the whole thing is that people don't know what they want. You need to tell them what they want. That's education. You need to show them what they want. You need to show them options. So I don't know how it's in Russian, but like a drill that you put into the hole. Like this? How is it called in Russian? Where you press the button and it like puts a hole in the wall? Drill, okay. So the thing is, from a market perspective, people are not buying the drill. They're buying the hole. And they don't really care what the drill is, for the most part. They need to have a hole. And if you think of it in that way, what is the hole in the market? And then you think about, okay, what is the people's willingness to pay for the drill? What color can it be? What are the features? What is the price? But you don't lose sight on the fact that they want a hole. I think that's really powerful. So again, poor income levels should not be mistaken for having low aspirations or quality performance. And this is Kazakhstan is really a problem. And when people think, okay, this guy makes 100,000 tenge, and we're building some market research for a client, and we think he's poor kind of, or he can't afford maybe to go to Essentai or to buy a Range Rover. But that doesn't mean that this person doesn't have an aspiration to want to go there or want to save money and then eventually have this experience. So again, it's really, really important not to kind of just get really super focused and think, okay, every single reference point is like locked in, but to think more holistically, like, okay, and build this sort of customer needs journey. So like this person, they want to eventually in 2 or 3 years, they might turn into our target customer. Like for example, like all these students. If you're a student, and I assume like you're making, 50,000 tenge for an internship, in 3 or 4 years, I would assume that you would maybe make 300, 400 with a good professional job. And from a marketing perspective, you would eventually become a target marketer, a target client for a lot of businesses. So the last thing is upscale premium targeting works wonders. So what I was saying before was, in Kazakhstan, you either go up or you go down, and you get stuck. If you go down, you're kind of stuck with a price that, let's say your costs go up, and then you really have a hard time raising your prices. And if you raise your prices, then you're kind of like, your customers are like, well, this is kind of expensive. We see this a lot with restaurants and cafes in Kazakhstan. So like they'll launch. I like the Horeca business in Almaty because it's really, really dynamic. Like every month there's a new business, there's a new bar. But what happens a lot of times is that they'll have this huge social media campaign. Like there'll be this huge buzz, all these hype machines and stuff. But and the prices will be kind of subsidized for that initial like 2-3 months. And then after a while, then they find out that this is not sustainable. We should increase our prices. And things like quality suffers, things like less marketing budget suffers, and a year later then they close their business and they move on to something different. And that's really basically what happens is they don't really fall into what part of the market they want. They want to be premium, but they also want to have like the students or the young professionals. So again, product positioning is super important. So obviously mass market is very price sensitive. It's very utility focused. In Kazakhstan, the choice for domestic alternatives is limited. There's a huge amount of import goods, and not that many domestic options. For example, like if you want to buy a phone, there's no domestic option for a phone. If you want to buy shoes, there's no domestic alternative for shoes. So for food, it's a little different. You can get it, but for the most part, for basically the things you wear and use on a daily basis, those choices are limited. So in Kazakhstan, because of this, there's a huge opportunity to develop local products specifically for the local market. And usually these have a higher success rate. So what we see with a lot of these startups is that they're developing specific local solutions for local needs and local problems. And this is super interesting. And this is what sort of where we focus our business. And again, with the same thing with premium positioning, basically you limit yourself to urban cities. And you're always balancing between affordability and and serving your premium customers who don't want to necessarily be seen looking at other things. So with a lot of IT projects in Kazakhstan, they launch in Almaty, they go to Astana, and then they kind of they tap out the market. They can't go to, and they maybe try to go to Shymkent, but as far as like their ideal customers, their target customers, it's limited. They can't necessarily take a cashless payment system and go to Kizlyarda, which is like 80% non-cash payments, or I don't know, or more of the regional cities. So they get locked into this premium positioning, and a lot of startups have a really hard time moving outside of these two cities. So when you think about a business, think about something that maybe that could be mass market, that could have a utility function. So basically my takeaways, and I know I was speaking kind of fast and getting through this, but is do your homework on customer needs and on unmet needs. I think there was this guy yesterday who was talking a little bit about design thinking and how to go through the design thinking process. But if you can find these unmet needs, this whole and not a drill, it's really interesting. Second is focus on service innovation across value chain. A lot of people in Kazakhstan, they think, or in any entrepreneur, they think, if we just build a new product, it'll be super cool. And then they spend 6 months and they build this product. And then when the product is built, they're like, okay, who wants to buy it? But in the meantime, they're not building the sales channels, they're not building the other things that go into the business. So when they have this product launch, everything is ready to go. People understand what this product is, they understand what its value is, and they're ready to pay for it. So this service innovation is super important because I don't think you need to have a great product, but you can have a great service. And any touch point in your business can be improved. So your accounting, your internal operations, your ability to work with distributors, all those things can be innovated in a sense, and then by the sum of that innovation will oftentimes be greater than the final product. So again, appeal to community and word of mouth, like Instagram and social media is really not going to break, develop your business in a sustainable and scalable way. If you have a product and you have a great idea, you need to really focus on talking to people, finding out what they want, constantly asking them, is this working for you? Do you like this? What could be better? And by doing so, you build this great community of people who sort of really understand what your value is. This is the same reason why people are camping out of Apple stores waiting for the next phone, because they understand what Apple stands for, and Apple has been very intentional about building this community and this word of mouth, and it's really important. And then last is, focus on utility. What is the benefit? Why do I need this? What's important here? And why should I pay for it? So when I look at a lot of advertising in Kazakhstan, there's one good, for example, Kaspi. A lot of the banks, they have the first thing when you look at a traditional bank is credit is they focus on the percentage, the interest, 1 or 2%, or cashback 2, 3, 5%, and that works here. But in the U.S., we don't have these. We don't have necessarily this kind of advertising. Our advertising is more focused on what you can use with that 2, 3%. Travel Europe with this specific card, and you don't really know what that percentage is. And I think Kazakhstan is kind of slowly moving to more aspirational marketing, where it's what do you get by doing this? Who are you as a customer with Alpha Bank or Kaspi Bank? What does it mean to be a Kaspi Bank user, besides having a great app and a great experience? But does that mean something to a normal person? So that's interesting. So anyways, hopefully, think about this stuff, and if you have any questions, you can write me. So thanks.
You have a question actually about the data. You mentioned it before that actually in Kazakhstan we have a lack of data, or we cannot trust the data, like you said, this not go because there's a lot of mistakes or biases in their data. So how do you cope with that?
So
in your market research when you do for the certain projects?
So we do start with the stat.gov, and that gives us let's say for example, we'll look at how many credit card users are in Kazakhstan. And then the stat.gov will have the national bank will have their own data. So we'll start with that. And then we'll look at for example, we'll take that and look at the Russian market and build a proxy. So we'll think, okay, Russia and Kazakhstan are a little bit similar, not the same, but it's a good way to have 2 data points. So when you have 3 data points, then you're able to have you'll never get the exact answer, but you're able to have a more informed estimation. And that's really it. So what we do is we do interviews with people within these banks to find out sort of what is the inside answer, I guess. And then from there we build a bias assumptions, a table of assumptions, and then we work on let's think it's around 15 to 18 million credit cards issued annually or something like that. But we never just focus on one data source. And oftentimes in Kazakhstan, there's this thing called a network effect. So there's network knowledge. So you know something, and then you know something, but you guys never talk to each other. There's no platform, there's no system to share that information. So it's really about who you can connect with, the relevant people to give you market insights.
How do you think which markets in Kazakhstan are underrated for your person, for your experience?
I think IT mostly, actually. I think there's a lot of really great IT projects in Kazakhstan and really good ideas, that are making people's lives easier through technology or through innovative business. But the problem is that they usually don't have access to capital, they don't have access to funding, and they just kind of die. SARA specifically, it's hard to say because a lot of the businesses here are monopolized. If you have a telecom startup, you're not necessarily going to be able to beat Kazakh Telecom and work with these huge companies. You're going to have to work kind of within them. So yeah.
And what can be changed to change the situation in this market?
It's more like a politics, right?
Yeah. it's like one is like you just assume a constant rate of change over a period of time. So you just realize that there's not going to be some huge, new change overnight, but over time with, even like, events like this where people get knowledge and they think about ideas that over time there's going to be this sort of grassroots kind of entrepreneurship scene where like, okay, like, the government can do more. They can improve the system to allow entrepreneurs to have a better regime, a better scheme to improve their offerings, to give them better access to certain markets. But yeah, it's a tough question. But I think it's just, for me, I think it honestly is just going to be a matter of time. Like, there's not necessarily a way to rapidly accelerate without the government actually taking a huge push in that direction.
Also, you mentioned before that there are some products or the projects, there are customers for the local needs. Can you provide maybe some examples or maybe some projects which you work on, like specific examples?
That are taken from other markets and then kind of used here, you mean? Or sorry, I don't understand the question.
In your presentation, you mentioned that the projects that are specific, like for the local needs, so they provide some products or like they provide a service for the local needs. So, what kind of projects that there are? Like maybe you have some examples.
Oh, so there's like I think like a lot of those projects are related to agriculture as well. Is like taking advantage of. We had one project that we were advising on that was taking advantage of this. I forget what it's called. Kolkhoz, the Soviet style of collective farming. Kolkhoz, yeah. So that system is very built here, and in the U.S. it's a little bit more because of the land is pretty privatized. It's a lot harder to do in the U.S. But here there's a way of creating these kind of like co-ops, these communes that allow them to share resources and share knowledge practices, and to basically export all their products into China, into Russia, and they were able to set up this business really, really, really fast. And it was interesting because I had no idea of this concept of like collective farming, and they were already very like they understood how to do it. Like in the U.S. we had developed a co-op system. It took a long time, but here it was like this very specific example that worked really well here.
Explain your approach for the market research. For example, we need to understand how much water is consumed in our agriculture. What will be your tools?
So yeah, so like for research, it's pretty simple. You can go top down or bottom up. So then it's this estimation of like, for example, like, okay, we think of like how many movie theater seats are in Kazakhstan. We look at number of theaters, we look at number of halls, we look at number of seats, and we go down from there. Bottom up is basically you call the theaters and you ask them how many seats do you have, how many seats do you have, how many seats do you have. So it really depends on what is their research objective, what is the sort of percentage of accuracy that you want, and how fast and how much time do you have. Personally, I like bottom up because you get, it takes a little bit longer, it's more expensive, but you really get to be able to collect a lot of primary data. With top down, it's very good because it's very standardized. You can move very fast through projects, but your estimation could be 5 or 10% off. We had one project. It was kind of like online ticketing. It was very interesting, and we need to find out. Basically, the problem was how many theater seats are in Kazakhstan. And as a potential to sell unsold tickets and sold tickets. So we didn't have that much time, so we had to basically look at number of kinos in Kazakhstan per city. But the problem with that is some of these kinos are not working. They're like have limited hours on their website. They're like in Marais or some kind of regions. We don't have that. If we had more time, we would have be able to kind of call each of those places and figure out exactly how many seats. So it really depends, I think.
One question. What do you think? Which
kind of businesses and products have a potential to export, to expansion to the whole world. I mean, I have only few examples from SNG companies that expand to the world. It's video games, some IT products, and so on.
Yeah, I think I would say the same thing with IT product. Any kind of IT back-end development, develop programming kind of product can be developed here or piloted here very cost effectively. For example, I read somewhere that like a Ruby developer in Kazakhstan is like $2,000 a month for a very good one. In the US, it's really, they're about 10,000 or even 12,000. And for me, that's just a huge difference. And you know, as you know, it's like pretty similar kind of work. There's no really front end part of there. So if you have an IT project and then you have like, you know, $2 million custom Ruby kind of project, and you want to outsource it, have it done in Kazakhstan, not only can you get these people and you can pay them well, but the difference in terms of the quality will not be that big actually.
But there is a problem in ads, in advertisement. When you expand and you make ads outside in Europe and USA, you have to have a lot of money. Other kind of business that's easily to expand.
No business, I mean, most businesses are hard to expand outside of your own home market anyways. And I think Kazakhstan is in a kind of interesting place that if it wanted to, there could be IT businesses. I know one that is, it's biometric HR that's already moved into Southeast Asia, and they're coming out of Astana hub. They got a few clients in Kazakhstan, but they moved very quickly. I know another company that had, again, an IT cloud-based system that moved into Russia, but not in Moscow or St. Petersburg, but into Novosibirsk, Ekaterinburg, and they found a lot of success there. So I think, you know, but the idea they had though was scalable and understood that this was not going to be for the Kazakh market entirely from the very beginning. So they spent 100% of their time was spent on getting Russian clients. They spent the same amount of time trying to get local clients, for example, they would have a very hard time. I mean, the results would be very small. So there are some businesses that can be built for this market, and some businesses from the very beginning that have understanding that they need to be, that we're looking for different markets from the very beginning. You know, I like the Slovenian case as well, because the country Slovenia only has 2 million people, and most of its big businesses are outside of Slovenia. So obviously they have this mentality where it's like, if we want to, you know, grow and be expanded, we need to be global from day one. We don't think, okay, we need to move into Almaty, then Astana, then Shymkent, but from the very beginning, how can we position our company, how can we build our company to be global from the very beginning? And I think that's really just a mindset thing, like a mentality thing as well.
I have a question. Do you think people in Kazakhstan, especially in big cities like Almaty and Astana, have irrational spending habits? Because as you said, we don't really have middle class. We have upper class and lower class, and lower class is obviously takes a bigger part of the whole population. But situation is kind of weird because we have low-income population that is big, and entertainment segment like cafes, restaurants, you know, all the things that are not your base spending budget are growing. So what do you think of the irrationality of spending habits in Kazakhstan?
I mean,
present, like, how is it happening?
I mean, if you look at like disposable income, like disposable spending, I mean, it is increasing. People are spending more on things that they 10 years ago wouldn't, you know, that they were like bare necessities. So they're like spending on restaurants. There's disproportional amount of spending on things that you don't need. But there's also a problem in Kazakhstan, it seems like, with saving money. That you're spending kind of to your limit, that you're taking on credit, your debt, to fuel sort of, irrational spending or spending that's not sustainable.
So the part that is growing for the disposable income is actually from the saving?
Partly, or it's hard to say, or partly it's basically fueled by like credit. And that's really hard to break out, like if you know, people are spending money that they don't necessarily have, and they're getting it from elsewhere. And it's good for the economy, it's good for the banks, but at some point the the show is going to end, and there could be a problem there.
During our talk, you said that your firm is positioning itself as a premium fold, and also you said that other firms that doing market research, they are using maybe a wrong approach to market research. So, could you please explain in more details what is their mistake and what we have to improve in our, for example, education process in universities, colleges to deliver better education in the marketing field?
Oh, so two questions, I guess. Yeah.
The better development in education and mistakes of other firms.
So for us, we focus ourselves a little bit more on premium clients that are willing to pay a certain amount for our work. As far as our approach, I wouldn't say it's so different actually than other firms. So like collecting data is not the hard part. It's analyzing it and making insights and thinking about what does this data mean. I think that's the part where we can bring in an international perspective, that we can benchmark better against Russia. Okay, this from Hong Kong. So when we take an Asian benchmark, we always look at Hong Kong and Singapore. We take a SNG benchmark, we'll look at Russia. And then for just like a kind of a wild card benchmark, we'll look at the United States. And then from that, we have this kind of interesting picture. Okay, how does this client's needs or this client's business work with these different points? So as far as like how we collect the data, like we said, we look at primary research, secondary research. We look at statistical reports. We look at press releases, Forbes, VLAS. Like they have people will give speeches, interviews, and they'll say numbers, they'll say insights. And then from that, we just take all of that and start filtering through what is relevant, what is not relevant, what can be applied. And I think our process of interpreting the data, like actually analyzing it, is much stronger. I see a lot of reports here that they're kind of like a more of a Soviet. It's like this whole Soviet concept of like, oh, how good is your education? Oh, we have 400,000 books in our library. So it's like, but that doesn't really, it's weird, in a weird way, it does tell me something about your education, but I don't know how many, do your students graduate on time? Do they go to, graduate school? So again, it's like, for market research, it's the same thing. We interviewed 400 people, we got, 10, blah, 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 blah. But what is the real insight? Like, what do I do with this? Like, what is the action steps? How do I take this and actually apply it to my business? And I think we are able to do that better. So we focus a lot on the analyzing it, on the analysis, versus like, okay, just spending four months collecting data and transcribing interviews. But thinking about, okay, at a certain point we have enough sufficient data, so we need to move into like, you as a client, what can you do 1, 2, 3 very quickly, or at least have a timeline of how to implement our work. As far as education, that same can be applied to analysis as well. I think there's a lot, like case studies, working groups, especially like hackathon startup, like even when I was in school, a lot of my work was focused not on the process, but on the result. And by focusing on the result, then I can understand what kind of process I need. But if I focus so much on the process, then the result is the process, but that's not actually, in business, it's not enough. At the end of the day, a business needs to be profitable, or it needs to save costs, or it needs to have some kind of social impact, but there needs to be a specific result for that organization. So the process is important, but the process can change. So I think in education, it's the same thing can be applied. It's thinking about like today, for example, what is the objective here? Why are you here? You want to learn about market research or marketing. Okay, and then that's my goal. And who is this person? Is he qualified to talk about this? What is his credentials? So thinking in that way kind of gives you a way to like, okay, to be more efficient maybe, and to open up more ways to, I don't know, like have a result. So I think, did I answer your question, or?
Yes.
I was more interested on a project that were made by five students, like university students, I think. And so one of the problems that you mentioned was they didn't appeal to the community and they didn't have like feedback from the community. So how does and what are the best solutions or what are the best ways to have those feedback from community? Because like before creating something, it's really problematic to make an advertisement or to get all the people informed about our business or about something. How do you think the best ways of doing it?
So I think if you have like a business idea and like a new product, especially, new products are very hard in Kazakhstan. If you look at like over the year, like each year, like the total of new product sales, they're very, very low. It's like 2-3%. So most people are expecting something that's very similar and that they can understand. They don't. If it's something that's like enters very new and it's like I don't know, then it's if you don't understand it, then you don't trust it, and if you don't trust it, you may not buy it. So as far as like thinking about starting a business, I really think having these like having two types of interviews. One is where you interview like 100 people, like just across like a blanket, and what is there? You can get through Telegram or you ask your friends or create a survey, but getting that sort of that quantitative base. And then when you want to go deeper into the qualitative assumptions, then you can do kind of one-on-ones. Like, 5 people will tell you more about a specific, business or a product than 100 kind of random people that you just send out a link to. We take the same approach, so we build out a quantitative base, and then we think, okay, to have a hypothesis, you need to base it on like a certain sample size, and then from there we think, okay, like. This app, 100 people think this app, like let's say kind of a restaurant app that connects like wine with people's like dogs or something, But for example, we'll look at dog owners and wine drinkers and take 100 people from there. And then from there we think, okay, actually people, their dogs don't drink wine, they drink beer or something, so we kind of go down that road. But if we were just to start with 5 people like in an interview, we wouldn't necessarily have that hypothesis. So again, it's kind of going top down. And that can be applied to any kind of new business, new product development. And it works here actually. We find that people are very willing to talk about, I don't know, like their experiences, even calling. But yeah, again, doing that primary research and not having not basing it on assumptions that you haven't tested or like validated. And I think with these guys their problem was, not problem, but the challenge was that they had this assumption that they thought that like people would pay for this new cool coffee concept. But for coffee here in this market at least, people are not really interested so much in how it's actually produced. They care about the flavor, but as far as like if it's made out of like drip coffee with some kind of fancy kind of pressing machine, it's not as important.